while being fair to them, must start doing the same. We will no longer surrender this country or its people to the false song of globalism. The nation state remains the true foundation for happiness and harmony. I am skeptical of international unions that tie us up and bring America down.
Hello and welcome to Right Now, the official podcast of the New Right Network. I am your host tonight, Tamara Lee, and with me today is Dan Crenshaw. Dan is running for U.S. Congress in Texas District 2, and he's a former Navy SEAL, Fox contributor, and is with us tonight. The election, the primary, is next Tuesday, March 6th. So we wanted to get Dan on AMA, Ask Me Anything, and take your questions and get him on everybody's radar for Tuesday. So welcome, Dan. Thank you for joining us.
Hey, did we lose Dan?
I'm here now. I haven't been hearing anything for a while.
Oh, Tamara, Dan's here. Go ahead, repeat your question
Oh, okay.
or your intro. I think we just had some minor technical issues.
Okay, all right. I thought I was like all good to go and I'm talking to myself, but that's okay. It was a good dry run. So here we go, everybody. Hello and welcome to Right Now, the official podcast of the New Right Network. I am your host tonight, Tamara Lee, and with me today is Dan Crenshaw, and Dan is running for U.S. Congress in Texas District 2. Our AMA, Ask Me Anything broadcast is out on YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, Discord, Twitter. You can find us all over there and catch the recording afterwards too to share. And if you want to send in your questions live at discord.me/New Right Network, and then we can get your questions in there for the Ask Me Anything portion of our interview tonight. So I want to thank everybody for joining us, and we look forward to a great conversation with Dan. He is a Navy SEAL, and I'll let him do his former Navy SEAL and sometimes Fox contributor, and has just incredible backstory to what brought him to running in the elections 2018 for U.S. Congress down in Texas. That primary is this Tuesday, March 6th, so we want to make sure that everybody is, it's a small world, and it's amazing how you can connect those few degrees of separation. So the more people that know about Dan's race and about the elections Tuesday, hopefully we can leverage the mega network across the country and bring a win in for Dan on Tuesday. So thank you for joining us, Dan.
Well, thank you for having me, Tamara. It's great to speak with you again.
I know. So Dan and I did a shorter version of an interview on my Tamara Lee's Trend On. So I feel like that was maybe the macro conversation. We got the big overview, and if anyone wants to go back and find that, they can do that at TamaraLeeLLC.com or Tamara Lee's Trend On Blog Talk Radio. But for tonight, we get to go a little deeper dive on the issues and your policy and why you're running. You're spot on. I know this from our previous conversation on the kind of mega candidates we want to send to Congress in 2018. And as a coalition, there's strength in those numbers. So the Trump train is behind you. But why don't you start to give our audience, because your backstory is so incredible and that's what brought you to this point of running today. Why don't you start there, and then we can go forward after that.
Well, sure. Yeah, I'll start right from the beginning. I grew up in Katy, Texas. My dad was in the energy industry our whole lives. I've lived around the world because of that. Grew up a little bit in South America, but mostly grew up in the Katy area. And I've 6 generations of Texan in me. And
Wow.
from an early age, I wanted to become a Navy SEAL. And I read some cool books, and I was attracted to just the patriotism and the adventure, and being the best of the best and serving your country the most elite way possible. And every decision I made from that point on, I think was geared towards being a SEAL. So I went to college. I graduated from Tufts University in 2006, and I was commissioned as an officer upon graduation. I did ROTC there, and went straight to BUDS, or Basic Underwater Demolition / SEAL training, as we call it. It's a 6-month training schedule, grueling. Broke my leg the first time through, and right in the middle of Hell Week, so I get the full benefit of doing it all over again. And
That's incredible.
Made it back through with Class 264. Around 2000, I guess it was 2007 by the time I was done with it, and went on to become a SEAL. And my first deployment was with SEAL Team 3 to Fallujah, as well as Basra, Iraq. And my second deployment was back to Iraq and Ramadi, and working all over Al Anbar province on the western side on the borders with Syria. And my third deployment, it's really when my life changed forever. I was about 6 months into that deployment in the summer of 2012. I was we were on a last-minute mission to help some of our Marine brothers out in Helmand province, and one of my interpreters who was working with us, really great guy, he stepped on a pressure plate right in front of me, and he was dismembered immediately by 15 pounds of explosives underneath him, and I was right there next to him. So it kind of felt like being hit with a truck while also getting your face blasted with a shotgun. And I was blinded completely, and didn't lose consciousness, and I was able to actually get up and get out of there when the medevac helicopter came. But I was immediately put into a coma, a medically induced coma, so that I could recover as soon as they saw me. And so I woke up about 5 or 6 days later without a right eye, and told I would probably be blind forever in my left, but they were going to do what they could to save it. And I really had no. People ask me what that's like, knowing you'll never see again, or possibly never see again, and it's funny because I answer every time I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what that's like, because maybe it was faith, really God's just giving me the strength to just believe that I would see again, and belief truly does have healing power. I mean,
I believe that.
I think there's actually studies that show you that,
Mm-hmm.
that it's true. And just heck, it's just positive attitude. And I just never imagined that I wouldn't have full vision again, as long as there was a chance. I figured it would happen, and because miracles in the operating room, it did happen. Obviously not perfect vision. I require corrective lenses, but and it actually took a couple of years to really nail down my exact prescription and the exact contact lens that I need to see 20/20 with. But eventually did get it. And I deployed 2 more times. Once back to the Middle East, working mostly in the intelligence side of things, and then again to Korea in 2016. And just based on my injuries and based on the rules, mostly based on the rules and regulations that we abide by in DOD, I had to be medically retired. And so wanted to keep serving, and really kind of struggled to find how was it going to continue making an impact on society and serving the American people. And I figured the first thing I should do is get a master's degree and educate myself, and dragging my knuckles through the dirt for 10 years and getting a lot of good experience. But it was time to go back to school. So I did my master's degree in policy at the Harvard Kennedy School of Government, and went from there to work with Pete Sessions, Congressman Pete Sessions, on Capitol Hill for a little while. And then turned down a job working with the Department of Defense in order to run for office. I mean, when that opportunity came, and my TEDPO announced retirement here in my district, it was definitely time to to answer the call, and all the signs are pointing in the right direction. So that's what we did, and we're glad we did it. And we're almost to the finish line here, and it's going pretty well, I think. But we're still gonna work as hard as we can. And actually, I just stepped out of just a bunch of restaurants here in the area because just going out and meeting as many voters as I can. I literally just stepped out momentarily just to talk to you all.
Oh, well, good. We're glad you did that so we could join us, because I know it really is important. You're doing the right things of getting in front of the voters, and that's where it's going to make the difference of having those votes. But as I said at the beginning of the show, with the Trump support nationwide and our mega candidates, those of us who were very involved through the social media platforms in the Trump 2016 election and campaign, and the one since, we're happy you did step out and join us, because we're hoping to be able to leverage the network that we have in place for your, just making a louder noise. And it's those degrees of separation. Like I said, you never know
Of course,
who's listening, and so we're glad you stepped out, but we also know how critical that ground game is.
Oh yeah, we don't stop. We don't
Yeah.
stop. We're working every day and every night, and you just have to do it, 'cause every vote matters. And whether we reach them online or over the radio like we're doing now, or I go everywhere. Most candidates don't do that, and you really have to, because there's not a huge voter turnout in these things, and it can be decided by just a few votes.
And so you have a primary challenger, correct?
I have a few. There's eight others in the race.
Wow.
Yeah, and it's competitive. There's some good ones. But I will say, I think the front runner, Kathleen Wall, she's set a record for how much she is spending of her own money to get this seat. She set a record for U.S. House seats, and
Wow.
about $6 million. And that's what we're competing against. We just got to get into the runoff with her. And she just pays actors and TV personalities to do her ads on radio, and but I would encourage voters to really do their research and look her up online, see how she does in the debates against us, against the rest of the candidates. And we've really got to put a good person in office, because I truly believe this district isn't really considered a swing district, but it could be. It could be if we get the wrong people up there. Democrats are fired up; they're ready to invest if they sense weakness, and we should really worry about that, because they could potentially do it if we get the wrong candidate to represent us.
Well, that's the challenge for all of the races coming up in 2018. It's making sure that it's not just any candidate, but it's the one that can win, and who is willing to work with President Trump on continuing his agenda and not work against him, because that's been frustrating for all of us.
Yeah, no, it is. I know we got to support the president's agenda, and you got to put the right people up there and help the president any way we can. Sometimes it takes directing him to the right direction. There's a lot of controversial things said about gun control recently that have some people concerned on the right, and so we need smart people up there who can help the president and move that agenda forward for sure.
Yeah, well, I like what you said about serving the country, and really that, I think, if there's an overriding theme in the 2018 elections, it would be returning our elected representation back to it's an honor and a service, and that the career politicians, the political elitists, it's time to clean the house and refresh to what our Constitution and founders intended for our self-governance. And it sounds like that aligns with your political philosophy.
Well, it certainly does. I mean, one of my main jobs up there would be really a shield, protecting Texans from Washington. We really should be deciding our policies at the lowest level when possible, and the federal government should have the powers that are laid out in the Constitution, and no more. I'm a very I maybe I told you this before. My ideal political office is really a mayor. because you can really help people, and the partisanship leaves that office a little bit, and you can really just help people and constituent. You're accountable to your constituents because they're right there in front of you. And I've moved around so much in my life, I don't really have that hometown. It wouldn't make sense for me to run for mayor. But and my expertise is really at the federal level and the national security issues and foreign affairs, which is the job of the federal government. And but I have a deep respect for local government. That's really where the innovation happens. It's really where the magic happens.
I'll have to tell my brother-in-law is running for mayor up in northern Wisconsin, and so I'll have to give him that shot in the arm and say, "Go, mayor!" Mayors. But that is true. I think
I'm jealous.
Yeah. Well, maybe might be something in your retirement years or something after you serve.
Yeah, well, we've got to do what's best for the American people, and just my experience is better suited at the federal level.
Well, and we need that. We need people with your perspective, and that's we have a Twitter room set up for Veterans for Congress, #Veterans for Congress, and there is what we're calling the new generation of leadership, and many of them are those who came of age after 9/11, who have had experience with the military, with global affairs, and at the federal level. And I think bringing that versus people who have spent their life in Washington will be refreshing and to our benefit.
Absolutely. Even if veterans are running on the Democrat side, I still respect them for doing it. We can actually have a conversation because we know that we ahead of time that we put country first, I think. And that's so important.
Yeah, that would be refreshing. Some respect and healthy conversation and dialogue, because we've lost that with the team left and team right being so polarized. So, quick question, and then I'll go through some of the questions that are posted on our Discord channel. Were you surprised after your deployments, which is remarkable, that they had to kick you out, essentially, didn't they?
Yeah, it was kind of like, listen, you have to go on permanent limited duty, which is just a military term, which means you really can't deploy anymore.
Yeah.
Or go through the medical retirement process, and it really doesn't make sense to stay on permanent limited duty. You're really just collecting a paycheck, and staying on what we call shore tours in the Navy. And that it's kind of a glass ceiling, so it's better for me to serve in different ways, and I knew that. So it was had to get out.
Okay, so were you surprised then when you went to the academic side and studied the policy? Did it enlighten and reinforce your real life experience, or do you feel like they're two different sides of a coin?
It does. I have a lot of respect for Harvard. I realize most people view them as a horribly liberal institution. But as an institution, they do try to give both sides. And you can find what you need there as far as policy prescriptions go. I mean, one of my favorite economists, he's a major economist there at Harvard, Martin Feldstein. He was Reagan's economic advisor. He's responsible for a lot of the economic thought over the last 30 years. And he's a big player at Harvard. I had two other Republican professors teaching me weapons of mass destruction policy and nuclear proliferation policy. And one of George Bush's deputy national security advisors was one of my professors. So you really get, these people have they have experience plus the academic side, and Harvard does a great job of mixing the academics with the experience, and I think that's so important. Of course, the students lean very far left, and I think the institution itself is constantly fighting against that in a way. They're in a difficult position because students always want to pull them left. But I learn a ton there because I see the other side so much, and I think a lot of the students don't learn as much because they don't even want to hear a conservative point of view.
Well, it's good to have that voice there then, and at least at least sounding the clarion, whether or not they listen.
Yeah. The dialogue does happen to a limited extent.
Okay, so Milk is asking. So first of all, he asked what was the story in regard to your eye patch, which you answered. But then his follow-up question was, "What's your favorite rum?" Do you have a favorite rum?
Yeah, I mean, I think it kind of depends on the situation. If I'm sipping it, I can't remember the name. I can't remember the name of it, but I think Sailor Jerry's pretty good just for a good drink out. Um, I like Sailor Jerry and a little bit of Coke in there.
Yep. That would be the girls one, the Malibu rum and Diet Coke, but
Yeah.
you could
So
go
I
with the
would know.
man's version.
Yeah, I'll never say that.
Okay, so then our Sash 1980 is asking, what are the challenges facing the future of conservatism, especially regarding Latinos? I hear you have a lot to say about debt. Your thoughts there? And then you being a SEAL, what does that bring to the table regarding importance of security clearance? So 3 questions. We can take them one at a time. Yeah, there you go.
Okay, so the first one is the future of conservatism. That's extremely important. We have to provide a vision that is attractive to people. I think the left has lost this idea that they need to provide a vision at all. I'm really not sure what they stand for at this point, except activism. And,
yeah, the party of no, right?
Yeah, well, it's in a party of just latching on. I think they used to be. You look back in time. They used to maybe the party of labor, and I can at least understand where they're coming from on that. I don't understand where they come from anymore. It's up to conservatives to really provide a vision. And we're the party of freedom. We're the party of morality, and a society based on Judeo-Christian values. That doesn't mean we exclude other religions at all. It doesn't mean we exclude people based on their skin color. If anything, we're an inclusive party. Defined by who we are and a set of values that are common among Americans, and because of that, we're the guardians of the American identity. We're the party of red, white, and blue, and proud to be American, and that's not exclusionary. And the left will try to say it is, but it's just not. And we need to constantly fight that battle. And so, big things that concern me are the youth, and as we all know, in college campuses playing very far left, and we have all 3 branches of government right now, or our state representation is very good, it's very red, but I don't know how long that will last with the next generation, and we have to message to them better. We have to talk to young people a lot better, and a big part of that is just what leaders we choose. We're not changing our values, but we can change a little bit how we message those values, and we can just, if you put the right people in office that young people can look up to and at least respect, then we've got a lot better chance of convincing the younger generation that conservative values is the best form of governance, that common sense policies that we advocate really are the right things for the country. And you mentioned Latinos, and I spent some time abroad because like I said, my dad was in the energy industry, and that tends to take you all over the world. So I spent a lot of years in Colombia and Ecuador, speak Spanish. My stepmother's from Peru. I have a very good understanding of what the Latino community is, and they're actually very conservative, and we got to do a better, there's no secret here. We just have to go talk to them. And as a Republican, sometimes we don't. Here in Houston, there's some good outreach programs that are beginning to be developed, where we really push hard to talk to Latinos. My district is 30% Latino.
Oh, okay.
And, it's so important that we talk to them. And again, I don't have any big secrets on how to do that, except just go do it.
Right.
Go to those college campuses. And reach out to young people, and reach out to the Latino community. Just go talk to them. And that's what I do. I go and I speak Spanish to them, and help them understand what we stand for, and they'll vote Republican if we just bother to reach out. And because it's so important. I look at the demographics of our country, and we should not be too comfortable with where we're at as conservatives. We need to keep up the good fight and really prove ourselves and really provide that vision that's attractive, and that Reagan optimism is so important. And and that's a big reason I'm running. What was the next question?
You being I hear you have a lot to say about debt. What are your thoughts on that?
Right. I mean, because we always talk about it as conservatives, that we're the party of fiscal responsibility. We don't always see it, though. I think we get wrapped around the discretionary spending that's appropriated annually, and that's important. We should be cutting waste where necessary on that, but really what we have to focus on is mandatory spending, and that's Social Security and Medicare and Medicaid, and making the hard choices there so that those programs actually last for my generation. and
Yeah,
it's the driver of our debt, you know. And actually, if
right.
you look at the numbers, discretionary spending as a proportion of spending is going down because of the budget caps of 2011. So, but the mandatory spending is what's going up because it's not appropriated annually, and no politician is really beholden to changing it. It's called the third rail of politics because nobody has the courage to touch it. But you know, in 10 years or so, just over 10 years, Social Security trust fund will be insolvent, and that should concern us greatly because benefits will automatically be cut, and then somebody will want to put tax increases on us in order to pay for that.
Mm-hmm.
And you know, so I'm definitely in favor of personal retirement accounts. I think we need to raise the retirement age slowly, the way we actually have been for 30 years. It just needs to continue. And because, you know, I'm going to live longer and retire later than the generation before me. And, you know, it's important to recognize those are hard choices. And there's little tweaks in policy we can do to keep this insolvent or keep this solvent and actually make sure these programs continue and make them more efficient too. I mean, we really got to take a hard look at how we do Medicaid and how we do Medicare and how we do Social Security so that.
Well, and don't you feel like there's so much, I mean, there's waste and to me it seems, and this is just me, so what do I know? You're more studying on it, but it seems for the average American, it's that there is such a lack of financial responsibility that they have an open checkbook essentially, and so there's no accountability. There's no incentive to be frugal, and yet the taxpayers have to be because we're seeing less and less of our money.
That's exactly right. When you have something like mandatory spending and entitlements that isn't, these are not appropriated annually. They're not in the annual budget. You know, and our politicians don't have enough incentive to really do anything about it. But that we've got to talk about it, and we've got to actually do something about it. And I think, you know, I hope that the party will tackle this after midterm elections. I understand they probably politically are, you know, realistically not going to do it before the midterms, but we really, that should be our focus in 2019 for sure, certainly.
Yeah. Well, and that's if you get this new wave of group coming in the 2018 who want to fix things. I mean, it's like Trump, that he's actually calling them out and say, Congress, do your job and let's fix things that are broken. And it's possible to fix them. It's just that the establishment parties haven't wanted to because they just toss the football back and forth, whatever the issue is, the political football issue, back and forth because there's always another election coming. So they don't really want to solve it because they want to have something to run on. So,
right, and that's why I talk about it all the time with my constituents. You know, so I've laid the groundwork. I'm like, this is what I'm going to do, guys. I'm going to hit these programs. So, you know, if you don't like it, tell me now. But I get good feedback because people do care about fiscal responsibility. So, you know, at least from my point of view, I'll tackle it because we need to, for one. But also I'm just honest with voters, and if they don't like it, I'll come back and I'll explain exactly why we need to do it. And because taking away entitlements is always hard, no matter how conservative they are and how much they care about fiscal responsibility. Even those voters don't like entitlements being taken away. And but we have to explain it. People are smart enough to understand it. This is what good governance looks like. We have to balance our checkbook.
Yeah. So, okay. So you being a SEAL, what does that bring to the table regarding the importance in security clearance?
Well, yeah, and there's a few things you learn in the SEAL teams early on, right? Right from the get-go in buds. One is you always take care of your people. Always take care of your people, and that's a lesson we learned in the military, not just the SEAL teams. And you know, even in training, we every time you run 100 miles at a time, and then you go to the galley, or the galley means the cafeteria where we eat every day. The officers always eat last. The leadership always eats last, and you know, I don't think Congress should really be any different. Like, you eat last. You work as hard as you can for your constituents. You never quit on them, and you always have their back. And another thing we learned is, well, never quit on your teammates. I mean, and this starts again early on. You run in the course of Hell Week. I think you run 200 miles total over the course of that week. but you do it with a boat, carrying a boat on your head, about a 300, 400-pound boat, often filled with water and sand. And if anybody in that crew, ducks their head or doesn't carry their weight, the whole team fails. And anytime you quit on your people, the entire team fails. And again, that's really an American ideal, right? That you cannot quit on your neighbors. And it starts low. It starts at the family, then in your neighbors and your church and your community. And because if you're willing to quit on them, if you're willing to just rely on a federal government for anything beyond that, then your society fails. That's what we mean by rugged individualism. It doesn't mean no community. It doesn't mean we don't have a government. It just means that we know where strength starts, and it does start at the individual level. And if you can't pick yourself up, then you should be able to rely on your neighbors. And if they can't do it, then you rely on your community. And if they can't do it, then you rely on local government, and then state, and then federal. I mean, that's really the progression and that's our philosophy as conservatives. We got to explain that a little bit better.
Right.
And you have to put it in those terms, and because that is the backbone of a strong society, and you learn that early on in the SEAL teams. And then third, it's about leadership. I can't necessarily get my guys to follow me across a minefield deep in an enemy territory just because of my rank and sense of authority. They really have to believe in me, that they can trust me, and that comes with real leadership. It's connecting with people, it's inspiring them, it's showing the passion, it's being smart about what you're doing, and people can respect that and actually follow you. And you have to understand that if you're going to be a leader, then that's really a gift given to you by those who are willing to follow. And I don't know that a lot of our politicians really understand what real leadership is. They just they might vote the way they think they should vote, according to whatever polls they're reading, or however they can get reelected, and then they go back and collect money from donors. And we've lost sense of what real leadership is. And it's not having everyone agree with you all the time. It's not trying to please everybody. It's just trying to do the right thing, and then have to explain yourself so that we can actually bring some respect back into politics.
Yeah, I think officials anymore are elected representatives to have our best interest.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so next question here, and you kind of touched on it before with the gun rights. Do you think Texas is becoming right-leaning as opposed to a strong red state? And what are your thoughts regarding the NRA? Because, boy, don't we know Texas is big, bold, right? It has that swagger.
Yeah, it sure does.
Yeah.
I talk to voters a lot about gun control issues lately, and everybody's pretty shaken by the Florida shooting. I think almost seems more shaken than in past shootings, and they're ready to have conversations about it. It's our job as leaders to really push us in the right direction. I'm a strong Second Amendment supporter, as most of my constituents are, but even they want something done. And so it's my job to really look at the policy issues and see what can actually be done while protecting our Second Amendment rights. I'm not in favor of restricting the types of guns we buy, or the types of ammo, or the magazine capacity restrictions. And I'm not in favor of that because I don't see it doing any good. I see it feeling good for the left, but I don't see it doing any good when you look at 2 to 3% of gun-related deaths are because of ARs. I don't see that doing any good. What I would see doing good is much better system of background checks and really preventing the wrong people from purchasing guns in the first place. I think we can improve those systems a lot, whether it's enforcing our own laws or creating better processes so that the wrong people do get on those lists where you cannot buy a weapon because of your criminal record, or because of the threats you're making, of all the red flags that are happening, like we saw in Florida, and all the points of failure that occurred there. We can do a better job. We can do a better job on that front for sure.
Okay, so Milk wants to know, and if you want to answer Packers, feel free, because we love tech. Yeah. Wait till after Tuesday to come out with that answer, huh?
No, I'm never gonna do it. I've got a funny story for you, real quick.
Okay.
My brother was visiting me in Coronado really right after I got hurt, because I needed a lot of help from family, and my wife really, she was struggling as well. So he came out to visit and help out for a week, and so I took him on a tour of the SEAL compound, and he was wearing all his Texans gear. He had like Texans hat on and shirt and everything. And we walk into what's called the grinder. It's the main just hub of Bud's training.
And that's in San Diego, right?
This is
Southern
this is in San Diego. Yep.
Okay.
And guess who else was on a tour of the Bud's facility? It was the entire Dallas Cowboys football team. So I bring him in, and he's wearing all Texans gear, and he's just getting the meanest looks in the world. It was pretty funny. And we watched the entire football team try to go through our obstacle course, and it didn't go well for them. These guys are amazing athletes, but they're not really built for a SEAL obstacle course, right? Because they're all 250 pounds of muscle. That doesn't work very well with the obstacle course. But it was a funny experience.
That's a good one. What timing is everything, right? It just happened to be there.
Yeah. He was like, you knew this was going to happen, didn't you? He thought I did it on purpose.
Oh yeah, you set that whole thing up, right?
Yeah, right.
Well, that's good. So how hard was, and you mentioned your wife there, and I know, who have service members. What is the perspective, if you can, just real quickly, from the other side, from the spouse side?
Oh, well, it's hard. I mean, we don't talk about that enough, and how crucial it is of who the real heroes are. I think sometimes the real heroes are the families that are left behind, and no, we definitely don't talk about that enough. And because from our perspective as SEALs, we're doing exactly what we love to do. We love deploying. We're going out with our best friends, and we're doing work on behalf of America. But our families get left behind, and they don't always know what's going on, and they're always waiting for that phone call or knock at the door, and that takes true strength. I think more strength than what we have as SEAls. I really believe that. So my wife got a call at 5 a.m. She knew something was wrong, because why would she get a call that early?
Mm-hmm.
And when the person a person calling is very formal, and are you the next of kin for Daniel Crenshaw? We have to talk to you, and that just puts her into a tailspin. The only thing that really gives her any consolation is the fact that nobody's knocking at the door in uniform, because that means she knows exactly what that means. So at least she knew I was alive, but the word was not really getting to her very well, and she wasn't actually sure that I would make it. Just because the game of telephone is a confusing one, and it wasn't. They thought maybe my whole face was blown off. They just weren't sure for a while. So it was really hard. But what she had amazing friends that were there right away. Some of them Gold Star wives. Because Gold Star, for anybody who doesn't understand that, is it means that it's a widow who lost her husband overseas. So some of our best friends are widows, and they were over right away, just taking care of her. And that's just the kind of community that we have. We truly have each other's backs no matter what. And the SEAL teams are, I think, better than most in that regard, because it is a small community. It's very tightly knit, and we're just very blessed. I think that's why a lot of our guys just get taken care of a little bit better. And my heart always breaks for a lot of soldiers and Marines and soldiers in the Army who don't necessarily have that sense of community that we have. And we have a lot of programs that help us out, and a lot of foundations, and I always want to help out more the guys in the Army who are struggling with the same things, but maybe don't have the same support systems that we have in special operations.
Do you feel like that's why Trump's message of loving each other and loving America again maybe resonated, because we've gone so far from that in terms of a country, and then you see that work so well in your niche as SEALs. Imagine if we could get back to loving each other like that as Americans.
Right, and that's a big part of my message as well. It's not always about the policy issues. Everybody, even room of 100 conservatives, everybody's got little different ideas of what the policy should be. But what we do agree on is that American identity and standing up for the flag and saluting with God in our hearts. And that is really what we stand for. And it used to be what everybody stood for. And so you're exactly right. We do feel like those values are being attacked, and it's really up to strong leaders to combat that. And I think Trump's message really did resonate. Like, it's okay to chant USA. You know, it's not corny.
Yeah.
And we're tired of people telling us that it is. And it's, you know, and then they are so bold as to say that it's some kind of white nationalist movement. It's just not. You know, I'm in these hardcore conservative groups all the time as I'm running a very red district in a primary, and I never hear any thoughts of racism. I never hear it. And you know, it just makes me proud, one, to be part of these groups, because it's just not who we are, and we're tired of being told that's who we are.
Right.
Like I said this before, conservatism is inclusive. It's not exclusionary, but we care about the content of your character. We don't care about the color of your skin. We agree with Martin Luther King on that front.
Okay.
And,
also, two things that Trump has said. So SS exclamation point EM wants to know, tell us the truth. What is it like to operate in those shithole countries?
well, I mean, it's
I'm just a messenger on that question.
Yeah. I mean, it's exactly, I guess, how you imagine. I mean, I don't know. We love what we do. We feel like we're doing good. We take the fight to the enemy, because when you don't take the fight to the enemy, they can take it here. So, I mean, what's it like? It gives you purpose. You know, I have no regrets. I would do it all over again. You know, with some of the greatest people I've ever worked with and that I'll ever work with, and we're doing it for the right reasons. Some of these countries are tough to work in. It's tough to, in places like Afghanistan. It's hard to help a people that don't necessarily want your help, and you know, and trying to help them rebuild their country and train them the way they need to be trained. But you know, it's hard. It feels like you're beating your head against the wall sometimes because the cultural differences are so extreme. But it's uplifting at other times because you do meet locals and nationals who really do care about their country and care about and appreciate America's help, whether you're working in Iraq or Afghanistan. And
So Duke wants to know which country you visited had the nicest people.
I assume he means on deployments.
Yes.
Well, first of all, you know, my deployments were to Iraq, Afghanistan, and then after I got hurt, it was back to the Middle East, working in Bahrain and Lebanon. So more, I guess, your Arab states there, very not exactly war zones. And then my last deployment was in Korea. So they're all extremely different, you know, and I don't even want to generalize, frankly, about a people, because you meet some ones who want to kill you, and you meet others who are just some of the greatest in the world. You know, I mean, you know, you're fighting along. You know, our Muslim partners are they're dying right alongside of us, because they believe in American values the way that we do. Like I said, I mean, my interpreter, who was blown up right in front of me, he's a Muslim, and he cared about. He wanted to become a SEAL. That was his goal in life, you know. And it's so, you meet great people everywhere. You meet bad people everywhere.
Yeah. So the answer would be the ones who didn't want to kill you, mostly.
Yeah, they're great. You know, but I would say, Lebanon is a very cool place to work. I mean, the people there, it's a very interesting place. I mean, you've got Christians and Shia and Sunni Muslims all living and drinking beer together in the same areas. That's a very unique country.
I was just talking to someone who grew up in Beirut during like 60s and 70s, and it sounds like, wow, just amazing. It's like you just always were very aware of your environment. Fascinating. But
that is a very fascinating place.
okay, so let's see. Trying to find some questions here. It sounds like you covered. Why do you think it took, let's see. Why do you think it took so long for the government to make logical choice of sending the SEALs in after bin Laden instead of a stupid, expensive, decades-long war? And that's from James Jesus Angleton, or James Jesus Angleton. I don't know which way he pronounced it.
Yeah, well, I would say it's not as if we knew exactly where he was this whole time. That you can watch the movie on this, and I think the Zero Dark 30 is fairly accurate. I mean, they had a pretty decent idea he was at this compound, but anytime you're planning an operation like this, especially if it's in a country like Pakistan, it's not something you just act on right away. You do need to do your due diligence, and then they were watching it for maybe too long, but it wasn't as long as the entire Afghan war for certainly. And also keep in mind, this wasn't just about getting Osama bin Laden. Like I said before, you have to do that when you leave these vacuums of power. You get 9/11 and you get ISIS. And that's why I always say have to be very honest with the American people about why we have these lengthy wars, because we can't afford to leave a vacuum. The world is a dangerous place. There's lots of people who would love for us to leave and have the time and space to plan against us from there. When you have special operations forces out there, when you have military out there, you're keeping the pressure on them there. And it takes somebody, and I just have to be honest about because what I've seen and what I know, and I have to be honest that I'm not one of these politicians that will say bring all the troops home, we're done with it. No, it's not. I wish it were that simple, but it's not.
So, what is your position on the NSA and mass spying on millions of America? Saras Chan wants to know that question. So as we kind of, I'm sure the two are intertwined, right? Your military and then your NSA and intel.
Yeah, I worked very closely with NSA analysts on a daily basis over the course of my career, and it's I would say, I mean, I definitely don't want the NSA spying on millions of Americans. Just to answer that question bluntly, and are there abuses? Yes. Are there more abuses by Google and Facebook? Hell yeah. So it's not exactly what you think. As with every issue, it's a lot more complicated than you might realize. Collecting mass amounts of data, it's not as if they can read your text messages. It's not as if they're reading your emails, but they are collecting, who you're talking to, and they can chain, they can look at the chain of calls and contacts there. And maybe that is a little bit too much. And there are definitely some cases that we've heard of where there was just unconstitutional warrantless tapping of entire areas. That's unacceptable. So it really takes people who understand the nuances of this to really come up with the right solutions and the right regulations and oversight on this kind of spying. I agree. I always tell people it's not black and white like it's made out to be in the media with the talking points here and the talking points there. It's just another reason I advocate put people in office that you trust, and we will not do wrong by you. But I've worked with NSA quite a bit. I don't think they're bad people. I don't think the intent is to spy on the American people, just because that's just my experience. We're truly trying to protect ourselves from threats abroad.
Well, so then there's the question of when the threat is from within, like the Alwan brothers. How do you see that when it's a problem then from the inside?
Right. And the answer to that is if you're going to spy on American citizens or even foreigners that are inside our country, it has to be done carefully. We have to work closely with law enforcement because there's different authorities that the military uses and that law enforcement uses. And with law enforcement, there is a judicial process to that, and I think we should adhere to that whenever we can.
All right. Let me see. We are okay. I'm just kind of checking on our time so we can get to as many questions as people. Are you worried about voter fraud in Texas? That is from Desperado.
Yeah, I mean, we should be worried about voter fraud everywhere in America. You see a lot of cases and a lot of statistics where you really are seeing that. and voter rolls being just filled with people who are either deceased or here illegally. In Texas, it's pretty strict here. I mean, it's pretty strict getting a driver's license, and it's pretty strict when you go in to vote. So, should we be concerned about it? Always. We should always be looking for ways to ensure that our elections are done the right way. But here in Texas, I think we're doing what we need to be doing. Probably some room for improvement here or there, but Texans take that pretty seriously.
So how do you feel about that wall?
Well, I feel pretty good about it. I mean, it's one of my number one priorities is border security, and the wall makes sense in a lot of places, but we really need to be talking about a good understanding of what makes sense at what places along the border. And in a lot of places it's a wall. Some places just a fence will do the trick. In other places we need more Border Patrol agents doing patrols. In other places we should have drone technology so that our Border Patrol agents don't have to be out there. There's a lot of systems that are already in existence the military uses that can be used, like it's called the PGIS system. It's actually an acronym that I can't remember what it stands for, but it's essentially a big blimp that we use. They're all over our bases overseas. Why not put a few of those up? It has a very a high resolution camera that can be used to really watch huge swaths of territory. It's not very expensive.
You didn't just give away government secret there, did you?
No.
I'm kidding.
No, those things are out there. And you don't need the most expensive drone technology either. You don't need these multi-million-dollar Predator systems. You just need some of the over-the-counter drone systems that we can train our Border Patrol agents on and really secure that border. I mean, it's a big priority for us in Texas because we're on the front lines. So we feel very strongly about it.
So then that goes into the probably the next area that is an issue with the border security is how do you feel about the opioid crisis and solutions in the drug problem? Because I mean, it's been a war on, what was it, 1960s when they declared the war on drugs, and here we are how many years later, and with all the American ingenuity, we still haven't fixed it. So what's up with that?
Right. Yeah. Okay. So just simple questions.
Yeah, nothing deep.
Yeah. So I mean, the opioid crisis runs. That needs to be a very whole of government, multifaceted approach because there's a problem with our culture. It's a problem with opioid addiction. It's a problem with heroin coming into the country, both from not just our southern border, but also China. It's you want another reason to keep the pressure on Afghanistan. Well, it's a major producer of heroin. The networks out there that are exporting it. So it's a global approach and it's a local approach, and finding the right balance. I was talking to some experts about this just this week, and some feel that the pendulum has swung too far. Before it was too easy to get opioids for prescriptions. Now it's so hard that it's forcing some people to look to other ways and then look to cheaper heroin. And that's what causes overdoses, when you really don't know what you're taking. Mm-hmm. And getting the right treatments in place. Do we throw somebody in jail because they have an addiction, or do we try to help them overcome that? And then there's the other issue, like, why are people doing it in the first place? Why do they feel that their life has so little purpose that they can abuse these drugs? And well, it goes back to giving purpose and dignity in someone's life. And do we put them on entitlement programs, or do we show them a better path and focus on retraining and vocational training that really helps you find that purpose in your life and makes you feel like you're part of society? American Enterprise Institute talks about this a lot, and I really agree with that philosophy of what entitlement program and what social safety nets really should be. And it should be first and foremost about getting people to back on track and finding your dignity and your contribution to society, because you're on this earth for a reason. You wouldn't be here unless you were here for a reason. And everybody has a purpose, and you just have to you have value to our community, no matter who you are. And it should be our role to help them find that.
So, do you think there are fundamentally bad people or enemy? I mean, I would agree with that we need to affirm people's dignity, but I feel like one of the mistakes many Americans make traveling abroad is that we take that American ideology with us, and we treat all cultures as, and maybe I'm stepping on a politically correct landmine here, not to, be in your world, but I feel like there's a misunderstanding of there are differences in cultures sometimes, and that's to our detriment. So what do you say for, there are bad guys?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't deny that at all. I don't think that's what I meant.
No, and I'm not saying you did, but I guess.
Right, but it kind of a similar but related, or different but related subject is, yeah, I mean, moral relativism versus moral absolutism. I am a moral absolutist. I do believe there's right and wrong, and that there are some values out there that just have no place in America. That's certainly true, and I think where you're getting at is this sense that just because somebody has a set of opinions that it's right and should be reasoned with. Well, that's not always true. Sometimes there is right from wrong, and so I absolutely do believe that.
Well, and I guess to go back to your positive